The new Barbie movie is about to release. You can see it on the 21st of July, except if you're living in Vietnam or the Philippines. Vietnam has already banned the movie. The Philippines is considering it. The question is why? Why do these countries have a problem with a movie on dolls? The answer is maps. Barbie has one scene which depicts a controversial map. It shows the contested South China Sea as part of China. We've told you about the history of this water body. China claims around 90% of it. But an international court has rubbished their claim. Other countries have laid claim to the South China Sea, countries like Vietnam, the Philippines, and Malaysia. It's a very sensitive issue for these countries. Now, in the last decade, China has increased military patrols in the region. They're also building artificial islands. Simply put, it's a political tinderbox. But Barbie has decided to light a matchstick. Their controversial map has led to a ban in Vietnam, and reports say the Philippines could do the same. And what are the movie producers saying? Well, Barbie is produced by Warner Brothers. So far, they've been silent, like the doll. And banning things we know is a touchy subject. Many say it's actually counterproductive. But in this case, there is a larger story, a story about how Hollywood has surrendered to China. And the reason is quite simple. It's money. In 2020, China became the largest box office in the world. They took over North America. China's total revenue was $3 billion. North America's was $2 billion. And this did not happen overnight. It was a gradual rise that happened over 2 decades. So Hollywood was in a tight spot. For starters, their budgets kept going up. People are not keen on low-budget movies nowadays. They want to see big stars and big action. But high-budget movies also have a downside. You have to earn a lot more to make enough profits. Meaning, you can't just rely on the North American box office. You must be a blockbuster in China too. Just one problem though. Chinese censors are brutal. You can't show anything on Xinjiang or Uyghurs. Nothing on Tibet or Hong Kong. Nothing on homosexuality or LGBTQ either. And Hollywood played along. In fact, I have some examples for you. In 2016, the first Doctor Strange movie came out. It was based on the Marvel comics. Now, the comics showed the main character having a Tibetan mentor. But in the movie, it was a Celtic mentor. No prizes for guessing why. The movie made around 20% of its money from China. So job done. Another example is World War Z starring Brad Pitt. It's a zombie movie. The first cut showed China as the source of the outbreak. The last cut doesn't mention a source at all. Red Dawn was released in the year 2012. It shows an invasion into the United States. The shooting was done with Chinese flags. But in post-production, they became North Korean. That's the magic of computers and fear. Iron Man 3 also appeased Chinese censors. The movie's villain was called the Mandarin. He was supposed to be of Chinese ethnic origin, but in the movie, it's played by a white actor. These are not some random movies from obscure production houses. These are the biggest franchisees out there. Fast and Furious is another example. One of their movies cast wrestler John Cena as the villain. During the promotions, he called Taiwan a country. But days later, he issued a public apology, and that too in Mandarin language. I could give you more examples, but you get the point. Fear is driving Hollywood, the fear of losing the Chinese market. And you know what's worse? This is self-imposed censorship. It's normal for countries to demand changes to foreign films. It happens all the time. Even India has sought such changes. But in China's case, the censors don't even have to ask. Most of these changes are made voluntarily by movie houses. It tells you what the equation is. The Americans love to call Hollywood their soft power export. And yes, the industry is unrivaled. But the Hollywood of today is not the Hollywood of the last century. It is not serving American interests. It is serving Chinese interests. Some of you may ask, why is that a problem? After all, is it not about making money? Well, yes, it is. But then you must be consistent. You talk about LGBTQ rights and representation at the Oscars, but in China, you remove all such references. That's what Hollywood is doing now. In 2019, a movie called Bohemian Rhapsody was released. It was Freddie Mercury's biopic. In the Chinese release, there is no mention of his sexuality. How about that for activism? And with Barbie, it's a double blow. Both the doll and the industry are supposed to be American flagships. But one is now made in China, and the other is made for China. After diplomatic ties, let's discuss interpersonal ones. I'm talking about dating. It's not for the faint of heart. On paper, it seems easier than ever. You have social media, texting, video calls, plus an abundance of dating apps. Users bounce between Bumble, Hinge, OkCupid, and Tinder, pile up matches, message back and forth. They want to find love at first swipe. But more often than not, it doesn't work out. So enter real-life Cupids. They call themselves dating coaches, and they've become quite a phenomenon, a global phenomenon. Our next story is about one such coach. His name is Chai Pak Yin. He's based in Hong Kong. He teaches men how to flirt and seduce women. But now he's been sentenced to community service. He's been found guilty of overcharging his clients, something to the tune of $69,000. Not a story with a happy ending. But this is the worst case scenario. In most cases, these dating coaches are like any other life coach. They have expertise in the playing field of love. Their courses include personality training sessions, outfit makeovers, and group retreats. And we're told they also give you homework. They modify their programs with changing times. If there's a boom in dating apps, they'll train you how to create an attractive profile online. If there's a pandemic, they'll guide you over video, chat, and text. Different tools, but one goal: helping you navigate the long, winding, thorny road to true love. It is a lot of work, and it comes at a cost. Anywhere between $20,000 and $8,000 a month. It is a vast range, yes. It depends on where you are and what is the scope of your program. And this industry is booming. Worldwide, it is now worth $13 billion. And it's growing every year. Dating coaches are also earning millions of views on YouTube. They're releasing books. They're hosting conferences. Turns out more and more people want a love coach. The question is why? Experts say there are two big factors. The first is that colleges have a guy problem. I mean, female university students now outnumber male students the world over. So 54% of college students in the world are women. Apparently, they're looking for dates and they can't find them. Then there are the pitfalls of online dating. It can be toxic. In 2020, 37% of online daters reported facing persistent unwanted contact. 35% received unsolicited sexually explicit messages. So women are seeking professional help for safe dating. And there are obviously other reasons too. But these two trends make dating difficult, especially for educated, successful single women. And they have, unsurprisingly, become the target market for love coaches, these women, at least in the West. In Asia, it's still a man's world though, especially in India, where about 80% of the clientele is male. But trends and prices aside, let's ask the golden question. Are these courses worth it? Would you hire a dating coach? Well, it depends on who you ask. Many say they feel happier, more fulfilled. If not in their romantic pursuits, then in their singlehood. Because ultimately, these programs work as confidence boosters. They give the jilted and the brokenhearted tangible romantic goals. And their love lives a structure, perhaps. In a way, it can be called romantic upskilling. And it's getting more takers by the year, even if the results are not guaranteed. But then again, with love, they never are. And for our last story, let's talk about food. It's one of our most essential needs. We work day and night to put food on the table. A lot of us do. We can't survive without it. And you know what's the biggest threat to our food security? Soil. You can't grow crops without fertile soil. Floods and droughts get worse if the soil is not healthy. But due to constant damage, it has continued to degrade. In some places more than others, like in the European Union, where 60% of the soil is unhealthy. So now they have proposed their first ever soil law. What is this law and how will it help? Our next report tells you.
The secret world beneath our feet is mind-blowing. It's an astonishingly diverse ecosystem, home to millions of species of animals, plants, and microorganisms. Roughly 90% of those species are yet to be named. We depend on this magical ecosystem for 99% of our food. Yet, we barely know it. Soil. It's the source of all life on land. But its future looks bleak. Since the Industrial Revolution, about 135 billion tons of soil has been lost from farmland. And within the next 60 years, the world's topsoil will be gone. We have pushed our soil to a worrying state, and over time, its health has grown poor. This is true across the world, but in Europe, the soil is in a terrible state. 60% of it is unhealthy. It takes thousands of years for soil to form, which means urgent protection is necessary. And now the European Union wants to do exactly that. In a first for the continent, the European Union has proposed a soil law, a law intended to undo damage done to the soil. It would require member states to continuously monitor the health of soil, fertilizer use, and erosion. But why was this law required? Because soil degradation poses a great threat to humanity, and the biggest risk is towards food security. Healthy soil is the basis for food production. We know this. And over decades, we have abused this fact. Intensive crop production has depleted soil. And think about it, the global population is projected to exceed 9 billion by 2050. There will be competition for land and water resources. So, let alone feeding the growing population, sustaining even current levels of production might be impossible. At best, food will be very costly. At worst, there will be no food. Both quantity and quality will be worse. And climate change won't help. Higher temperatures reduce the level of minerals, protein, and vitamins in crops. Already, zinc deficiency affects over 1 billion people across the world. We don't talk about it enough, but it's an existential threat. Especially because what we do with our soil contributes to climate change. Agriculture is one of the main reasons for global warming. It leads to 30% of the global carbon emissions. And you may have learnt this in school, but soil stores carbon. So marginal improvements to soil can help us. So the EU's proposed law has clear benefits, but it isn't perfect. Many say that the law may propose general goals, but it doesn't set country-level targets. Critics say the plan lacks ambition. And this may be true, but during these rocky times, maybe a weak soil law is better than no law.
And now to the latest from Pakistan. It's a military with a country. And reports say this military will conduct no drills or war games this year. Not because they've suddenly had a change of heart, not because the force has become peaceful, but because they don't have a tank full. Pakistan is running short of fuel, so apparently their army had to cancel all drills till the end of this year. This is according to some military intelligence reports that have come out, and it's a reflection of the dire straits that Pakistan is in. They've just managed to get an IMF bailout, but it's hardly the end of their troubles. Here's a report.
An army needs to be ready to defend the nation. And that readiness comes from training, which is why militaries across the world hold drills to keep soldiers alert and ready to handle any situation. But what happens when military readiness will cause more harm than good? When drills could end up bankrupting a nation? Case in point, Pakistan. It's running out of oil, so it has decided to not hold any military drills till the end of this year. This is according to a report from the Eurasian Times. It says Pakistan is trying to save fuel. And it makes sense. What kind of mileage can you expect from tanks and armored vehicles? Experts say one Pakistani T-80 tank consumes 2 liters per kilometer. And in military drills, dozens of tanks and other heavy vehicles conduct battlefield maneuvers. Obviously, crisis-hit Pakistan cannot afford that. Because remember, fuel imports are a huge part of Pakistan's economic crisis. The value of its currency has been falling for months now. The Pakistani rupee is going for almost 280 to the dollar right now. A year ago, it was about 210 to the dollar. So, as the currency tanks, imports become more expensive, and they keep draining Pakistan's foreign exchange reserves. To avoid a Sri Lanka-like situation where people waited hours in line for petrol and diesel, Pakistan needs to allocate its fuel wisely. It cannot afford to buy enough fuel for all the needs. So it must cut down somewhere. So it has cut down army drills, which is surprising because the army gets priority in Pakistan. It is, after all, an army with a country. It has been ruled by generals for half of its existence. So, how did the axe fall on this all-pervasive institution? There are a number of reasons, starting with the need for combat readiness. Look at Pakistan's neighbors, Taliban-controlled Afghanistan, Iron Brother China, and India. The Taliban are unlikely to invade. They have their own problems. China won't. It has already turned Pakistan into a colony. And India never invades. It has fought 4 wars with Pakistan. All of them were started by Pakistan. So Rawalpindi can rest assured that its eastern border is secure, which is why the military drills can be stopped. Fuel can be saved. Also, live ammunition. It's fired during drills and it costs money. So, by stopping the drills, Pakistan will be saving millions. And this isn't the first time they're doing it. Reports say they did the same last year. The military was observing Dry Fridays. Dry of a different sort. Military vehicles were parked on Fridays to save on fuel. Rawalpindi also returned over $10 million to the government. This money was meant to purchase equipment. They also let the government slash the defense budget by about a fifth last year. That sounds impressive until you see that even after the cut, the military got about 16% of the entire budget. You can't really expect much more from Pakistan's bloated military. So even the cancellation of drills is a cause for celebration in Pakistan.
Now to West Asia, where Israel is in the grip of its worst domestic crisis. People are out on the streets by the thousands. It's the 27th week of protests. There is growing anger, and it's against Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's longest-serving prime minister. Netanyahu wants to change the way the judiciary works. So he introduced judicial reforms. And that's what led to the protests in the first place. They started at the beginning of this year. Now we are in the month of July, nearly halfway through, and the protests in Israel are still on. Today, they had a high-profile addition. The police chief of Tel Aviv has resigned.
Unfortunately, for the first time in 3 decades of service, I encountered an absurd reality in which ensuring calm and order was not what was required of me, but precisely the opposite.
And why did he quit? Because of government meddling. He did not name anyone, but he said they wanted him to use excessive force against protesters, and that's something that he refused to do.
I could not meet the expectations of the ministerial echelon, which included breaking the rules, procedures, organizational order, and blatant interference in decision-making and operational discretion.
So no names, but no prizes for guessing who he was talking about. This man, Itamar Ben-Gvir. He's the National Security Minister. He's a hardliner. In the past, he's been convicted for incitement. Ben-Gvir joined Netanyahu's new coalition in the month of December. It was a move that alarmed many. When elected, Ben-Gvir wanted more control over the police. In March this year, he demanded tough action against the protesters. And now the police chief has resigned. Thousands took to the streets. They lit fires on a Tel Aviv highway.
I'm here today because I'm an Israeli who cares about democracy. I know that if the government decided to fire the head police officer of Tel Aviv only because he decided that it's legal to protest, I think this is one step further for Israel to be a non-democratic state.
Today is a special night because apparently the Minister of National Security, Homeland Security, whatever, fired the Chief of Tel Aviv Police for refusing to make sure that after every demonstration, the local main hospital is full of injured demonstrators. He refused to do that and got fired over the phone.
So what are these people angry about? Judicial reforms. Netanyahu thinks the courts in Israel are too powerful, so he wants to curb their powers. But critics say he's only trying to weaken the judiciary. And this is what the plan is. The parliament would be able to overturn court decisions. All you need is a simple majority in the Knesset, that's the Israeli parliament. And you can overturn a court order with a majority. Plus, the government will have a say in the appointment of judges. Why is that problematic? The government does appoint judges in other countries, like in the US. You see, Prime Minister Netanyahu faces court cases. He's on trial for corruption. And so this so-called reform could help him personally. The government can potentially manipulate the judicial system in Israel, which is why the people are upset. They're calling it an assault on democracy. So for the last 27 weeks, they've been protesting. The government remained adamant for a long time, but last week, it offered a concession. Netanyahu dropped a key part of his plan, the part that said that the parliament can overturn court decisions. That has been removed. But it doesn't really help him. In fact, it puts him in an even more precarious position. And I'll explain why. Netanyahu won the last election, but he did not win a simple majority. Fun fact, no party in Israel has won a simple majority ever. They've always had a coalition government. But this one is a particularly messy coalition. Netanyahu is a right-wing leader. He had to rely on what's called the far right to get the numbers. They joined on one condition: implement judicial reform, reign in the courts. That's what they wanted. So that's what he tried to do. Now he's backtracking and they're angry. They think the Prime Minister is surrendering to the protesters. So the allies are upset. At the same time, the people are also upset. They want the entire reform chucked out. Benjamin Netanyahu is caught between a rock and a hard place. He can't ditch the far right. They're the ones holding his government together. Any more missteps and the House of Cards will collapse. It could trigger Israel's 6th election in 4 years. On the other hand, he can't stop the protests. His Western allies are already calling him out, even his staunchest ally, the United States. It's unhappy. A raid in Jenin may have dominated the headlines for a few days, but he can't make the protests go away. Does this mean the end of the road for Netanyahu? Well, that's what many think. But remember, he's been prime minister for a long time. He's a shrewd politician, the proverbial cat with 9 lives. He's made comebacks before. The road ahead for him winds uphill, but it's definitely not the end yet. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. An exciting day at a US theme park in Wisconsin turned sour. A roller coaster ride malfunctioned. 8 passengers were suspended upside down for hours. And speaking of amusement parks, a popular roller coaster in North Carolina was closed after a viral video showed its support pillar with a crack. An upcoming venue in Las Vegas called Sphere was put on trial. It is being hailed as the world's largest spherical structure. Spain kicked off the historical Bull Run Festival of San Fermin with thousands of attendees. And finally, what makes the 6th of July significant? We are taking you back in history to the year 1942, when 13-year-old Anne Frank went into hiding in Amsterdam to escape the Nazis. Today, she's world-renowned for writing the Diary of Anne Frank. We're leaving you with these images. Thanks for watching.
Interesting. Can't see him. So that guy's up there just talking to the people, trying to keep him calm. Little steel thing. That's kind of like a safety switch. That's stopped. Make sure he's okay. Yeah.